Today I'm going to talk about one specific Texas Ranger that I bought a book about. I guess it was the fall of 21 when this book came out, and it has survived. It has actually won 2 awards, which is rather a vindication, since originally the press that was going to publish it, University of Oklahoma Press, the 2 outside readers said it was a great book. The editorial board said it was a great book. And then the faculty review board that they had just created, of the usual suspects, declared that they didn't any longer publish books on Nazis and white supremacists, and that's what all Texas Rangers were. And therefore, they would not publish this book. So having won 2 awards, that's 2 middle fingers up to them. See, I said that without cussing. It's amazing. Been practicing. And yet, this is the culture we're in now. I was just watching a show with my wife the other night. We tend to sit and watch TV together while we eat dinner. And it was a young man whose father was a Texas Ranger. It was a TV show called 911, Lone Star Law. Maybe y'all watch it. And he was telling his father that while he was a lawman himself, he could not become a Texas Ranger because, after all, they're the evil people who murdered all those folks at Porvenir, and that's all they ever did was beat up people of color and Hispanic Americans, etc. And I began to choke on my mashed potatoes and meatloaf and realized that, once again, I had tried to do something with this book, and we'll see if it ever works. Because what this book is about, and I put some of this in my introduction, is while it's fun now to bash a single organization for all the evils and ills of Texas, of white people writ large and Anglo specifically, in fact, there were good people in the Texas Rangers who did good things. And by golly, here's a story about one of them, and then we can discuss him afterwards. Yeah. William L. Wright was a ranger or a sheriff or a deputy sheriff or a law officer of some kind for 45 years, from 1894 to 1939. He's not your stereotypical Texas Ranger. This is as much as he's going to look like one. That's why we put him on the cover of the book. We'll talk about this picture later. He's 5'10", nearsighted as the day is long. Not very big, about 160, 165 pounds, depending on if he's out in the field or not. Apparently, the longer he stayed in the field, the skinnier he got. I guess he was his wife's cooking. But he is one of the big 4 of Texas Ranger lore. The big 4 being the 4 captains of the early 20th century who brought the Rangers forward from the Ranger Force into the DPS of today, Department of Public Safety. That's Frank Hamer. You've probably heard of him, of Bonnie and Clyde fame. There's also Manuel T. Lone Wolf Gonzalez, who, of course, writes his own fame in his own way. He dressed the part. Tom Hickman, who is a North Texan, who, again, is a man of great legend as well as accomplishment. He's the first guy to ever broadcast a rodeo on the radio. He was a broadcaster. Then there's Leonidas Wright, who nobody's paid much attention to. So why did I suddenly pay attention to him? Well, are you going to work? No, you're not. There you go. I was writing a book about Sutherland Springs, another well-timed book. It came out 6 months before that guy walked in the church down there and killed 34 people. So this book hasn't sold well either. It's okay. I don't write it for love. I write it for all the cash I get. Oh, wait, that would be wrong too. Damn. I don't know why I write this stuff. It's compulsion. In that book, there's a story about a rapist who raped and tried to kill a 15-year-old Czech girl named Alvina Olenek. Stabbed her 15 times after raping her, leaving the knife in her chest. He thought she was dead. She stood up and walked 2 miles to her parents' house with the knife in her chest to say that Refugio Jurek had done this to her. Wright showed up with his brother-in-law, fights off a mob who wants to lynch Jurek right there, gets him to the courthouse. Jurek has a case. He is tried, he is convicted and sentenced to hang. Wright, as the sheriff, this is the only hanging Wright ever had in his county as sheriff, is up on the platform with the prisoner. Wright's brother is there. A couple of neighboring sheriffs have come over to help him with this rather onerous duty. And Jurek asked if he could shake hands goodbye with his brother. So Wright agreed. The brother comes up, shakes hands, exits the platform. Wright steps forward with the hood to put it over Jurek's head, and Jurek stabs him right in the middle of the chest with a sharpened spoon, which obviously the brother had handed off. Wright stayed on the platform. They did pull the spoon out. Blood all over his shirt. Finished hanging Jurek, which was a horrific affair. Jurek still fought like a wildcat, as Wright recalled, before going to the hospital and staying home on medical leave for the next 3 weeks. This story attracted my attention. This is an interesting gentleman. So I was telling this story to one of my former students, now I guess he's the associate director of the Ranger Museum down in Waco. At the time he still lived in Austin. And I said, I thought I might like to write something about Mr. Wright, William L. Wright. He said, come by my house before you leave. And when I went to his house, he handed me 3 boxes of stuff. And the stuff was all the material given him by Wright's son. This is Dogie, a longtime lawman himself. Looks a bit like Dad, doesn't he? And Dogie had left behind, this is him when he's very young and when he's much older, had left behind transcripts and letters and photographs, and somehow they had gotten into Jody's hands indirectly through a common friend. And so Jody didn't want to do anything with it. He's busy with other stuff, so he handed them to me. So as I laughingly say, I got attracted to this by doing another project, and I got handed a book in a box. All I got to do now is put all the pieces together, right? That sounds simple, but it sometimes is more than you counted on. So let's go all the way back. Who the heck is William L. Wright, and what makes him a ranger? Well, he was born in Texas, unlike most people of his generation, really. He was born in Caldwell County. Now, if you look up here, see if we can make this work. Here's Lockhart, here's San Marcos. He was born out here in the countryside of Caldwell in his paternal grandfather's house. His daddy, Little Barry Wright, had come from Mississippi with his parents about 1858. Wright was born in 1868. Now, in that 10 years, Little Barry had become a home guard. He'd worked on his father-in-law's ranch herding cattle. He had gotten into the horse trading business himself. He had a store. He was even a justice of the peace for a little while, and also a stalwart Mason. But most of that had occurred not in Caldwell County. Let's go back, come on. But down here in DeWitt County, around the towns of Cuero and Yorktown, if you know the area down there. That is where Wright was raised, and that's definitely country. That is definitely horse country, cattle country, sheep country, a little bit of truck crops, but he grew up pretty much on a ranching family. The important part of all this, though, is who his mama was. This is his mother, Anne Elizabeth Tumlinson Wright. Notice that Tumlinson name. This is her father, Joseph L. Tumlinson, and his wife, Rebecca E.N. Tumlinson, who apparently liked to terrify her children and grandchildren by speaking Kiowa to them. I doubt she really could, but I'm sure it impressed them. Joseph L. Tumlinson is the son of the man who established the first ever ranger company in Texas history. His daddy, John J. Tumlinson, in 1823, got permission from the governor of Texas to establish the first ranger companies. So any of you Austin fans out here, Stephen F. Austin, sorry he beat Austin by months, okay? That's one of the long fights in ranger lore is who led the first ranger company. And it wasn't Tumlinson. He was an alcalde. He was a politician. He just went and got the permission and the money, mustered the company, and handed it over to a young captain. He's not the guy going out. Tragically, by the way, Tumlinson will be killed by Indians within a few months of establishing his first ranger company. Now, his sons, including Joseph and John J. Tumlinson Jr. and Peter Tumlinson, were all very active in the Rangers. Two of those, John Jackson and Peter Tomlinson, were in fact Ranger captains. Joseph served under them in several capacities all the way through the Texas Revolution and into the 1840s and 50s. Joseph then will go on to be a Texas state policeman in the 70s. And then we'll end up in a bit of a scandal in what's called the Reese-Townsend War, and that's a mess. Another one of those feuds. Meanwhile, if you trace all of Wright's relatives, William L. Wright, not just his granddaddy, not just his great uncles, not just his great grandfather, but I can document that William L. Wright, as a grown man, was related to 36 Rangers, present or past. What else was he going to be when he grew up, right? He's going to try, but he's headed for a law enforcement family. Early in life, I love this picture. He thinks this looks good. He's 21 years old, I think. I think this is his 21st birthday picture. He's got a new suit. He's looking good. By this time, he is an experienced cowhand. His daddy died when he was about 16 years old. And so Wright had gone to work on other people's ranches, herding their cattle as far north as Montana and Wyoming. He made one run up there and later was very open about it was too dang cold. He didn't go back up there again. By this time, his mama had moved, she's a widow, in to be close with her daughter, with her husband, who was the postmaster at Sutherland Springs, Texas. Here we go back to Sutherland Springs. That's in Wilson County. So, following a promise he made to mama, Wright came in off the range, settled down near Sutherland Springs, lived with her, and tried to be a farmer. He was a total, utter failure. Now, he by this time has more than one mouth to feed. He marries Mary Ann Molly Brown, who, by the way, has 3 brothers who are Texas Rangers, and her daddy was a Texas Ranger. So we just keep adding to the list, right? Now, Wright's recollection, when people asked him later about why he didn't stick with farming, is it didn't rain enough. The family's recollection, mostly his in-laws, were that he and his brother-in-law, Gratz Brown, spent too much time out in the woods going hunting. That's why things didn't grow. So after an experiment, so we're talking about between about 1889 and about 1894, let's say an experiment of 5 years. He's got a wife. They now have their oldest son. He's got to get a job that'll pay something. Deputy sheriff, right? There's a new sheriff in town, and he hires Wright, that's right on the left, I believe, as a deputy sheriff for Wilson County, Texas. It is an amazingly active term as a deputy sheriff for the next 4 years. He'll chase refugees, he'll chase outlaws, and the most spectacular case was the hanging of Maximo Martinez. Maximo Martinez was 36 years old when he decided he was in love with an 18-year-old girl in town. Problem was, Maximo already had a wife and 2 kids, but that didn't seem to bother him much. So he pursued her hot and heavy, and when she spurned him, he went to her house one night, beat her grandparents to death, and then raped and killed her. That's, we don't really think about Mayberry RFD having these kind of crimes, but they did a lot back then, more than we remember and more than we care to think about. So Wright got to witness and participate as they hanged Maximo Martinez, which was quite a zoo. And this is why you won't see this happening in 1909 when he hangs Refugio Jarek. Maximo wanted a 40-piece band playing. He had composed 2 corridos in which he was the hero and the wronged victim of it all. They had a Victrola man there to record the corridos so they could be sold and make some money for the family. There was a guy there demonstrating fire extinguishers. They built a house in the middle of the street, set it on fire, and he said, put it out with the fire. Wright, I'm sure, looked at all that and thought, if I am ever sheriff, this is never going to happen on my watch. Now, they finally got it all under control, got Maximo hanged and buried, and that was that. But Wright will have another object lesson in what it might take to be a lawman in Texas. In due course, the sheriff is voted out. And when you're voted, your sheriff is voted out, generally as a deputy, you go with him, right? The next guy will pick his own deputies, and he probably won't pick you. So Wright applied to be a security agent for a local cattle ranch, which required you to apply for a special ranger commission. Why? Since 1871, it's been illegal to wear a handgun in public in Texas unless you are a commissioned law enforcement officer. I'm sorry if that ruins every John Wayne and Western movie you ever saw, but that's the way it was. I personally think these things were probably not enforced very strictly unless you were totally obnoxious and they needed something to hook you up on. Otherwise, big iron on his hip. There's a reason why the ranger has a big iron and the bad guy shouldn't. It's against the law. That commission got held up briefly because the outgoing sheriff in Wilson County told his friend John H. Rogers, one of the great four captains of the last half of the 19th century among the Rangers, that Wright was a special guy. Now, by this time, Wright is almost 30 years old. He's a little older than your average recruit. But Rogers will pull his file out of the bin, contact Wright, and say, how would you like to be a real ranger? And Wright, goodness, what was he going to say, right? His granddaddy was, his great-granddaddy was, his great-uncles were, his brother-in-laws were or had been, his father-in-law. Yes. Not yes, but oh, hell yes. So off he goes to be a ranger. And in this picture, we see Wright right there. You'll notice that he's keeping the mustache. Note that mustache as we go through this. He'll be the last mustachioed ranger in the Texas Ranger Force by the late 1930s, and damn proud of it. Roger's a good mentor, though. Roger's a good guy to learn under. He's very religious, wants a strong moral code, no drinking, no card playing, go to church on Sunday kind of guy, and he expected that out of his rangers. He also trained them how to be fast draw artists. You can't be righteous if you're dead, right? So he trained them. Wright, in 4 years under Rogers, will endure the Laredo smallpox riot, in which Rogers will lose a section of his arm to a Winchester rifle shot. Took out 3 or 4 inches of his left arm. Wright will also endure the Reese-Townsend feud reborn. He will endure race riots in Orange County. He'll endure the assassination of the last Texas Ranger to die in service as a member of the Frontier Battalion, again in Orange, Texas. He gets a quick, hard schooling in what it's being a ranger is all about. He also gets a hard schooling in being a lawman in his own manner, in his own way. Was he a gunman? Well, sometimes circumstances forced you to be. A guy named Jimmy Davenport, Cotulla, Texas. Jimmy had already gone to jail once for killing a ranger. Served 5 years, which wasn't unusual, got out. Didn't want to go work in his daddy's barbecue shop down in El Paso. And that's literally what Daddy did. So Davenport bounced up and was a ranch hand in Cotulla, Live Oak County. And Davenport had a buddy in town who was a newspaper editor. Both of them thought they were just the biggest thing on the block. And they did not care for the Rangers that were posted nearby, especially that punk lieutenant, which is what William L. Wright was by this time. So one day when Rogers went out of town, they decided to settle the score with this lieutenant. Well, the lieutenant knew they were coming. He got the word. So he went, found a local constable to be his eyewitness, went up on the porch of the local saloon, set a Winchester inside the door, sat down in a chair and waited for them to come. Sure enough, here they come. Wright steps off the porch and tells Davenport, I know you're packing. Hand it over, or you're going to jail. Davenport starts yelling. His editor buddy decides maybe this isn't the right time, so he drags him into his office. And they spent the next 3 or 4 hours in there drinking and cussing and carrying on, while Wright went to quietly sitting back on that porch waiting for him to come out again. And they will. Sure enough, here came Davenport again. Got his coat swept back so Wright can see his pistol. Wright steps up to him and says, "Give me the pistol or you're going to jail." Davenport drew, fired through Wright's coat. Absolutely missed at that close range. Wright, thanks to his captain, has been practicing. He put 5 shots in Davenport. Whereupon the editor will spend the next 5 years writing about how Wright murdered his buddy. No. First shot fired. Coroner's jury ruled it was a fair shot. By the way, why 5 and not 6? There's no safety on a revolver. You don't put 6 shots in a revolver. You don't want that thing banging and going through your foot. Another cowboy movie thing you need to know in case Clint Eastwood calls you up next week and puts you in a movie. You never know. So Wright is now a guy all over the newspapers of Texas as a genuine shootist. Pretty much the only shooting like that he'll ever be in, but it doesn't matter. How many do you need to be in to actually become famous, right? So by the time he's approaching his 4th or 5th year, he probably should have been thinking about being a captain. This is him with his brother, Milam, and a fellow member of Rogers' company, Levi Old. But politics being what they are, the Ranger Force is now being created out of what's left of the Ranger Battalion. Lieutenants are once again becoming privates and sergeants. There's not much opportunity. So if you really want to make a living and feed your growing family, you become a sheriff. And in 1902, Wright will start 15 years as sheriff of Wilson County. This is Wright, second from your left. Notice he's wearing his Ranger, the 4-inch belt with a double line of bullets now. He's a Ranger sheriff. This is Luke, the jailer, kneeling down at the black fellow in front. And I wish I could identify the deputies because he had some really colorful ones, but I just can't. There's no names on this picture. Wright will serve, as I said, 15 years. Captain Rogers sent him a telegram when he heard the news that he'd been elected. "Make the people a Ranger sheriff," he said, "acting impartially without regard to nationality, color, or wealth." Wright carried that in his pocket for years, and in fact still had it when he died in 1943. Was he impartial? Probably not, but I try to spend some time in the introduction explaining why. He sent 53 men to Huntsville in 15 years, 18 for violent crimes that included murder, rape, and attempted murder. This ain't Mayberry RFD. You know, you think a small county in rural Texas, turn of the century, got to be one of the quietest jobs on earth. Some amazing stuff. And a lot of things that make you realize that not a lot has changed. I mean, one farmer literally walked into his kitchen, shot his son and his son's wife at the breakfast table with a shotgun, then sat down and blew his own head off, having already sent a Hispanic ranch hand to the next ranch to say, "Send somebody to clean up the mess." That sounds very modern. That was 1915. Like I said, there's crimes that he will deal with that nobody goes to Huntsville because nobody survives. So Rogers excels at that. He actually has that one hanging, Jurek, which, you know, he managed to do the right thing and even thwart a lynching. He will do so well that he will be elected president of the Texas Sheriff's Association in 1915. He'll be a consultant along the border and some of the things going there. And when things are going really bad, when Porvenir has occurred, when the fights down along involving Harry Ransom have exploded 2 years earlier, and the fights along some of the famous ranches like the King Ranch, etc. They need to reorganize the Rangers. They ditch a lot of the captains they have, and they hire a new batch, one of which is William L. Wright. They're being brought in to clean up the mess. Governor Bill Hobby appointed Wright to command the Ranger Company. For the next 8 years, Wright will serve, earning, according to the newspapers, the title El Capitan Diablo. Interesting. Love this picture. How many of you horse people? This is Jack that he is sitting on. He is a descendant of the original steel duster. This is a gift to Wright from the people of Wilson County. That is a pearl handle 45, a gift from the people of Sutherland Springs to the sheriff they're going to miss. He is carrying what will be referred to later as a Tumlinson carbine, a sawed-off carbine for work in the brush, because he'll even turn down Thompson submachine guns because he said, no, in the brush you need something that's actually going to hit what you point at. He's wearing custom spurs with Mexican coins for rowels. He's got steer heads engraved on his gun butts and on the leather of his saddle, which is another gift from the people of Wilson County. They're trying to convince him to stay, aren't they? You know, we give you a bunch of cool gifts, but he didn't. He will command over 40 men in the next 8 years. There's a couple of people. This is Company K at Laredo. This is him with the chuck wagon. John J. Eads, who was a former deputy sheriff for him. His mama is a Canary Islander, if you're into San Antonio history. Wright C. Wells is a cousin who came over from Mississippi, who apparently had an amazing variety of recipes. So he has a use. He's useful. Wright, in 8 years, over 40 men commanded, never lost a man, was never accused of abuse, never removed from command for stepping over the bounds. Not bad. 1919, the famous legislative investigation, there were 3 people that were singled out as being the best testimony and the finest examples of what Rangers should be. And one of them was William L. Wright. That's the meeting of the legislature that redid the Rangers. And a lot of them didn't keep their job, but Wright did. Beginning early, he pretty much shows himself to be a little different than what your stereotypical Ranger, particularly the ones they talk about today, are. One of the favorite things they love to talk about is, when did Hispanics join the Texas Ranger ranks? This is a trick question, actually. Now, they will tell you, they'll give you a name of somebody who joined in 1974, 1975, but you're probably going to say what I'm going to say. There were Tejano Rangers in 1823, right? In 1835. Lone Wolf Gonzalez always said he wasn't Hispanic. He's Spanish. That's why he spells his name different, which apparently, as far as we can tell, he's the guy who made up that way to spell it. He's Spanish. Eads said the same thing. Since his mom was a Canary Islander, he's not a Mexican Texan. He's a Spanish Texan. Really, I know. It's fun dealing with all this stuff. Here's a chunk of Wright's Company D at Brownsville in 1920. Do you notice something about a lot of these fellas? But wouldn't you, if you were stationed in Brownsville on the border, wouldn't you want a few Hispanic guys who knew the trails, knew the families, knew what the hell was going on down there? Duh, he's got 6 of them out of about 12 people. Half of his company is Hispanic. And I got the names for them in the book pictures. But yeah, he knows how to play this. You don't survive 15 years as a sheriff and another 6 or 7 years as a ranger without figuring out how to play this game and play to live and play to do it well. So Wright will be at Brownsville. Again, this is where Wright suffers his second wound in service, actually. Coming out of the post office one day, this is how he had his men dress, because in town, you didn't need a big old gun hanging out or a badge. Just kind of, make your way, and if time comes, you can show your badge and your gun. So Wright's coming out of the post office, and 2 soldiers run up to him. They know who he is. Said there's a guy on the corner throwing liquor bottles at cars going by. So he walks over to tell this guy, don't throw liquor bottles at the cars, and the guy pulls a knife on him. Wright tries to talk him down. The guy lunges at him, stabs him right in the middle of the chest. Fortunately, Wright was a smoker. He had a tobacco tin in his pocket, and the guy just stabbed him right in the tobacco tin. So Wright shot him in the knee, right? That's what the good guy's supposed to do. Shoot him in the leg. The guy got up off the pavement with the knife and came at Wright again. Well, sucks to be you. Wright shot him right in the face. Yeah, well, the guy's right up on you. You shoot whatever you can reach. That's my country boy Mississippi talking. That made the newspapers. It's an interesting discussion as to who this fellow was, but he does have a proper marker down in Brownsville. And again, writes in the papers. And here comes, that El Diablo Capitan talk, the gunfight against the knife-wielding marijuana addict. Actually, the guy was probably just drunk and angry at soldiers. So Wright is back. He's a captain now. He's got his own company, and he will quickly prove on the border in the midst of Prohibition to be the best captain as far as taking and confiscating liquor of any company in the entire state of Texas. This is him proudly posing with 60 horses and around 3,700 bottles of tequila. By the way, this is when tequila becomes popular because it's easier to get it across the border from Mexico than bourbon out of Canada, right? So tequila is becoming popular, and we're trying to think of ways to drink it. But that's Wright over here in the saddle with a long gun. And then, of course, this is all of him. This is him right here with the stuff. This is one of the largest hauls ever, almost 4,000 bottles, all of which had to be smashed in front of a tearful audience. Huge railroad strike, bombs, violence all up and down the Texas railroads, part of a national strike. So in 1922, Wright and his Rangers end up patrolling the railroads, and in addition to almost every other member of the Texas Rangers during the summer of 1922. Wright himself, right there. There's the mustache, there's the Coke bottle glasses. Pretty easy to pick him out. Still got that Ranger belt on though. And I don't want to, but we could pick out about 8 members of his company there with him. After he got done with that, he got called down to Corpus Christi for a special investigation in tandem with one Frank Hamer. Because the local sheriff had decided he didn't much care for the local leader of the Ku Klux Klan, who also happened to be a prosperous real estate dealer. So he just walked up to his car one day and shot him 3 times. There's going to be a trial. And Hamer and Wright together will be gathering the evidence, rounding up the investigation, rounding up the witnesses, and they will get the same verdict that too often the Rangers got. Total acquittal for the sheriff and his deputies. So many times. It must have been frustrating to be a Ranger because the guy you got dead to rights just walks. Or the governor pardons him 3-5 years in for what you consider to be a heinous crime. Again, this is Wright that goes down to join a big gathering of Ranger leaders. What are you doing now? At Austin, Texas. Come on. Number 6 on here, that's Frank Hamer. Right here, William L. Wright. Gathered to talk with the governor and report on what they've been doing. Of course, the governor was very impressed with how much liquor Wright's people have been smashing. He did not really want to hear much about shooting Ku Kluxers in their car. Back they go to the border. Love this picture. This is Wright with Company D. A little different outfits than 1920. This is where they're out in the field. And by the way, this fellow right here, that's Wright's youngest son, William L. Wright Jr., who will be briefly a Ranger, just like Dogie, just like his older brother, Jack. This is Wright. Look how skinny he gets out in the field. Notice those cut-off carbines that he's carrying. All's well and good until Ma Ferguson gets elected. Ma Ferguson hates the Rangers and they hate her. So rather than get fired, Wright quits. To the great upset of many newspapers all over the state. And he becomes simply a beat patrolman down at Robstown outside of Corpus Christi. There he stays for a couple of years while Ma ruins the Rangers, and we could talk about that, ruins the jurisprudence system in Texas. I'll give you a comparison. The 2 previous governors together had issued a little over 300 pardons. Ma issued $1,500 in her first 6 months as governor. There was a price, and lots of people were willing to pay it. She and Pop, her husband's the only guy to ever be removed from office as governor of Texas and then be told by a federal judge that he could never hold office again. That's why Ma will be elected our first and second woman governors ever elected in Texas. And this was their open campaign pledge: 2 governors for the price of 1. Okay. Someday I'm going to write a little bit more about the Fergusons and their impact on the Ranger mystique. But anyway, in comes her ex-attorney general, Jimmy, I've gone blank on his name. Not all red, but it'll come. Anyway, her ex-attorney general was elected governor on a law and order platform. He wanted a lot of those old good Ranger captains back in, and so he pulls Wright back into service. And that's Wright here on the far end as captain of Company A. And he'll be a captain for the next 4 years. There's a lot of questions, though. This man now is almost 60 years old. Can he be an effective Ranger captain? Well, I love what some reporter wrote down in Cotulla, Texas. He said, quote, Wright was looking fit as a fiddle and stepping about according to his old form. Now he's got a new target. Prohibition, still roaring, but he's going to be moved up to keep the peace in oil towns. Oil boom towns are the new big problem of Texas. So he'll be sent to Wink, Texas. That'll become his special project. Yeah, somebody just said, wow. There's not much left of Wink. It's a small place. Wink is a major problem by this time. Hundreds have been arrested in several raids. The mayor continued to rule Wink, even though a federal judge had dissolved Wink as an incorporated community. The mayor just stayed in and said, I'm still mayor. A police chief was shot and killed in his own jail. Wright was pleased to see another good fellow go in there, only to discover that the fellow that he was applauding was actually an escaped convict from Oklahoma who had a manslaughter conviction hanging over him. You can imagine Wright's pulling out what's left of his hair by this time, but he will bring peace and quiet to Wink. He will bring peace and quiet and have to solve several major murder. Finding a new dead body of a male floating in the Pecos River. Also uncovering the dead body of a woman and her 10-year-old daughter. All of these are things that Wright will work with. But then he's also got cases that were really almost comic. A former school teacher got together with a couple of his buddies and robbed a bank and basically couldn't keep their mouths shut. So this desperado apple dumpling gang that he has to chase down and figure out where they buried all their money in mason jars all over the place. It's a busy life. And Wright loved every bit of it. 1932, Ma gets elected again. This time she fires every Ranger but one. That includes William L. Wright gets fired. So back he goes to Robstown. His daughter's living in Corpus Christi, so he can visit the grandkids by this time. And then comes back in when Jimmy Allred is elected. And within less than a year, Allred decides to clean all this mess up and get it out of politics by creating the Department of Public Safety. He put the Highway Patrol under it. He put the Texas Rangers under it. He put a couple other small enforcement agencies. And that's the way it's operated ever since then. As free from politics as you can get it, right? And that's the point. And when he did that, Jimmy Allred contacted Wright, who by this time is approaching 70 years old. And Allred would not make him a captain. He made him a private, but everybody called Wright Captain Wright. And he got involved in settling longshoreman strikes in Corpus Christi. He got involved in chasing gamblers and prostitution rings down in South and Southeast Texas, mostly around Corpus Christi, Harlingen, and over to Edinburgh. He's not any spring chicken, though. as you can see from these pictures, but he is becoming history. He's becoming that icon that everybody says, oh, you want to hear some great Ranger stories? Well, they ain't any of them older than Mr. Wright over here. And he loves to talk. Just buy him a cup of coffee and wind him up. I hope you got some time, because he's going to talk. And he does have great stories. This is him when they hauled him up to the Texas Centennial in 1936. Put him in his little outfit. Who's that guy standing next to him? That's John Hughes, who was also one of the great captains of the late 19th century. They're there for the release of the Texas Rangers movie based on Walter Prescott Webb's book. They're there for show, aren't they? And Wright wrote that he thought it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of silliness. And he was really annoyed when they gave him the key to the city when he was in this big ceremony, and then snuck up afterwards and said, you have to give it back. It's the Depression. I figure they only had enough money for one key, so they're passing it around to the celebrities, right? I didn't even get to keep the damn key. He also got to be the MC at the release of Roy Rogers' first starring movie. Gene Autry had not been available, so some young whippersnapper named Roy Rogers got to walk around with William L. Wright. So he's getting a little of that accolades, but not much. He's basically part of the show, isn't he? Excuse me. At the age of 71, in 1939, rather than be fired as part of another budget cut, Wright resigned as a Ranger. Submitting his resignation, he wrote, quote, I am proud that I served my beloved state as captain of the Rangers. I am proud that I have served with some of the best men on the border. This is him with the family. That's Mary. That's his daughter. In between them, that's his second son, Jack, over there. This is a collection of grandchildren. And he's kind of hanging out at Corpus Christi, in Robstown, near Corpus Christi, as life begins to pass him by. If you look in the book, though, there's a great picture where they brought him out to meet with some young whippersnapper congressman named LBJ. And he's looking up at LBJ, and they're having a moment. What really worried him, though, is his son, youngest son, Houston T. Wright. William L. Wright was his second oldest, youngest son, was in that lost battalion that was taken at Bataan and hauled off to Burma. Now, Houston will survive the war. He'll come home 116 pounds. But his daddy won't be there to see him. In 1942, the month of March, age of 74, William L. Wright passed away. And his longtime friend and family doctor wrote that he had a heart attack caused by worrying about his youngest son, a prisoner of the Japanese. That's an interesting death certificate, isn't it? So William L. Wright was gone. Was he remembered? Not for many years. It wasn't until 1967 that they put up a monument to him in Floresville, which is where he served as sheriff. However, when they opened the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame at about the same time in Waco, he was one of the first 20 men inducted into that first class at the Waco, the Ranger Hall of Fame. If you go to the Texas State Library and Archives website, punch in a search, you will find out that they say that Wright is one of the three captains who restored the Ranger reputation in the 1920s. If you go to the Handbook of Texas, you will see he's listed as one of the big four: Hamer, Hicks, Gonzalez, and Wright, the successors to the four great captains, which is Hughes, Brooks, McDonald, and Rogers. One thing that ties this off, when I started this project, there were bios of Hamer. John Bosenecker has a great book. Has a book on Gonzalez, but he wouldn't have allowed anything different. Gonzalez went on to be a movie consultant, etc., and always, of course, has a book on Lone Wolf. Why would you not name yourself Lone Wolf? Just to attract attention, right? But not Hickman and not Wright. Well, now I've closed the circle a little bit, just a smidge, by publishing a bio of the third of the four great captains of the early 20th century. I don't think I'll write the book on Hickman, but maybe some student before too long, before the door completely shuts on all that sort of thing. And maybe we'll see it all get taken care of. Again, like I said, I wanted to write a book about a guy who did his best. And if you wondered what Wright would have to say about all this, I know exactly what he would say, because it's what he told every reporter who ever got this close to him. All I wanted to do was earn my paycheck. That seemed to be his mantra. I was going to use that for a title, but the editor said that's too dull. I said, okay. So now we got no title at all, right? Ron's not here to defend himself. So I think Wright earned his paycheck. I think he did what his captain told him to do, which is to be a ranger type of captain. I think he gave more to a law enforcement career than most people who've ever served. If you count up the governors, he served 7 different governors. He served in a number of different positions, and he went a lot of places that most of us probably would rather not ever even think about, much less go. And so I'll leave it to y'all to ask any questions you might have. Questions? Hot, tired, food? Ready for supper? Yes, sir.
So a lot of this material came from those boxes, but what are some of the other sources that you ended up with?
A lot of newspapers. The online newspaper files these days are awesome. There's an amazing pile of material that no one ever touches in the Texas State Archives. And I'm talking about most of the people who ever write books on Rangers, particularly those who criticize them. I went through 80 boxes of correspondence and files, etc., just on the daily reports, etc., of the Rangers from the 1890s, just to the eve of the 1940s. So that's an incredible wealth of resources. There's also an online site. If any of you think you have a Ranger relative, the Adjutant General of the state of Texas has an online website where you can go see digital reproductions of their pay stubs and everything else you might ever want to see, their appointments. Unfortunately, the post-35 records, which are the DPS stuff, were destroyed in the early 1970s, simply because we didn't want to spend any money to keep them. They were moved place to place, put out in some Quonset huts over at Camp McCulloch, and then there was a fire and some rain, etc. So most of that stuff has been destroyed. However, secret key, there's a guy who wrote a dissertation at TCU back in 1967, and he went through all those records with a tape recorder, and he sat there and dictated to himself all the stuff that he was looking at. So a lot of documents, reports, materials, etc., you can drive out to San Angelo, Texas, go to their little university out there. They've got them all on tapes. They will let you listen to them, but they will not let you record them. So you got to drive to San Angelo and sit there in their archive and listen to him talk to himself for 3 or 4 days. But they're just a gold mine. That's all we've got. So we got the records from his dissertation. We got the Adjutant General records. We have newspapers. We have the papers that I got from him. We have papers at UT Austin. However, they will tell you they don't have his papers. So you have to just be ugly to them. But I graduated from there. I'm very well practiced in being ugly to them. They will deny that they're there. I'll tell them, no, here's your accession record, honey. Go look again. Sorry, I'm not wearing skin-tight pastel pants and a brushback haircut, but get over it. Can y'all tell I'm fixing to retire? I don't give a damn anymore.
Did any of his descendants come on to be law enforcement or Texas Rangers?
All of his sons spent a brief time in the Rangers, all but one, and then they all went into something that made a whole lot more money, like the oil business. So he raised very smart sons. They worked for Chevron and Exxon, except for Dogie. Dogie got the bug, and he will be a lifetime lawman with the Border Patrol and then out in Hudspeth County as sheriff for a long time. One did, and the others. His daughter did not become a ranger. Well, actually, 2 out of the 6 ranger captains right now are women. Yeah, that's one talk I give is the Rangers aren't what television wants you to believe. And the leading ranger captain is black, has a PhD from Lamar University. Yeah, they're not your mama's rangers anymore. Yes, sir.
During the 20s, approximately how many Texas Rangers did they have on?
Now you touch a good issue. For all the evil they apparently did, they must have been damn busy because there was never more than about 50 to 80 of them at any one time. That's it. Yeah. Now, what you've got, though, is you've got special rangers. Let's say you donated a lot of money to Ma Ferguson's campaign. You got a ranch. You need security. So you write to Ma or Bill Hobby or whoever, and they will send you some commissions in the mail, and they'll pin little badges on themselves. They got the local jeweler to make, and people will think they're rangers. And those are the ones that, they're the ones that are a problem. They don't have any supervision. They don't have any training. And basically they got their badge in a box of Cracker Jacks. By, for example, 1917, there were 65 ranger commissions out, regular commissions, and a little over 2,000 special ranger commissions circulating in southern and western Texas. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of good writing about the Rangers. There's a lot of writing done by people who have not done their research, and it's rather maddening. There's a new book that I'm supposed to write an introduction for, and it's keeping me awake at night. Let's put it that way. There's some friends I want to help. This is one of those anthologies. And then there's some people in there that really ought not to get my imprint.
Just FYI, the former head of the Rangers was here for Independence Day.
Yeah.
There's 166 Rangers.
Yes, there are. 6 companies, 166, 2 women captains, 1 African-American, 3 white males. Yeah, and then the headquarters company at Austin, and then there's a company posted at Waco. Yeah, it's amazing. There's how many counties in Texas? You got it. I tell you what, those rascals are quick. They move all over the place. But yeah, Texas had a problem with jurisprudence. There's no doubt about that. Texas had a dry rot in its justice system. But as I briefly mentioned and tried to trigger you a little bit with, it quite often, more often than not, was not with the arresting officer. It was with the prosecutor who decided he wasn't going to bother. It was with the judge who decided he wasn't going to hammer down a conviction on a fellow Democrat. It was on a jury who thought, well, they got what they deserve, all this kind of things. These were systemic problems, and we should discuss that and make sure that we try to keep that away at arm's length from us today. But it's just too cheap an answer just to say, oh, it was bad Rangers and beat them up and send them off. Literally, there were at one point only 53 Rangers in service at the time that they were supposed to be inflaming the entire border from El Paso to Brownsville. That's a lot of riding. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What was William L. Wright's day to day like? Just in operation?
What was a daily operation? Checking up on the Rangers he had posted 1 or 2 at a time all over the map. I think he did a lot of phone calling, riding around, doing ride-alongs, checking out, because you'd have 8 to 12 people in a company. They'd be scattered over a 4 or 6 county area. So what I think he was doing, it's a darn good question. I decided a lot of what he was doing was rotating spot to spot, checking on them, see what was going on. Then, of course, he's got to be answering the governor. He's got to be talking to all the prosecutors. So he was a busy. And then if any case popped up, so all of a sudden he'd be called over to, say, Atascosa County because they needed an expert witness. Or in the Gregorio Cortez case, which he was involved in, they hauled him in as special defense for Cortez, So that took him through about 4 or 5 counties while he's still trying to do his job as a ranger to the south. Well, thank y'all for coming. I appreciate it.